All right, quick little aside. I didn't cover this in the last video, and I want to make sure that we cover it now. We also have the delete and the min-max functions that we want to make sure that we cover. We have the delete statement, which will remove an element from a specific index in a list, so we can go ahead and delete something. Okay, so I can actually use this delete keyword, del. I give the name, okay, and then I just go ahead and give the index that I want. So 0, 1, 2, we'll remove that 34 in the index. So again, 0, 1, 2. Okay, so it's index number 2. We're going to delete that. Then we're going to go ahead and print user info so that you can see it is now gone. Okay, and then I can also delete user info number. Now we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to do number 4. And then we can print that out and we'll see what happens. All right. And there we go. We've gotten the age out of it by using the delete function. Okay. So we can also do min and max. So let's just create a num list here. 1, 4, 6, 8, 9, 22. All right. So we can obviously see what the min is, what the max is. So let's go ahead and just print min of num. And let's print max of num. Okay. So you're going to see 1. The minimum is going to be 1, and the maximum is going to be 22. So 1 and 22. All right, so that's sort of where we're at in terms of the list method functionality. Let's go ahead and jump back over here onto the lecture notes, and let's keep moving forward. All right, so occasionally it might be useful to make a copy of a list. Okay, so let's say you have a bunch of data. You want to mess around with the data, but you don't want to destroy the original format of the list. You just want to sort of create a different list and mess around with it. It can be really, really, really useful to be able to make a copy of that list to be able to mess with it. So in Python, to make a copy of a list, you have to copy each element of the list. Okay, so there's a couple ways to do this. You can create a new empty list and then do a for loop to add to it, or you can create a new empty list and then concatenate the old list to the new empty list. Okay, so the way that would look like if I want to copy using a for loop, so let's say I want to copy this over. So I would actually iterate through for element in user info. Okay, I can grab each element. Okay, and then I can append it to a new list. So we can create a new list. We can call it UI, and I can make it empty. Okay, so right here you have an empty list. And then to be able to copy it, all I do is UI.append, and then I'm going to throw element in there. Okay, so now what happens is it's going to grab Jill. It's going to copy Jill. So from element, it's going to copy Jill into element, and then it's going to append element to the end of UI. Okay, so it's going to add Jill, then it's going to add Smith, then it's going to add 34, then it's going to add John, then it's going to add Doe, and then it's going to add 35. So just to check that, we're going to go ahead and print UI here. Okay, now what I want to also show you is we're going to print UI here. So you can see UI is empty here, and then it is full right here. Okay, so we have an empty list, and then we have a full list. Now what's cool is I can actually change things in UI. So we can say UI dot insert, and we're going to insert at for, fill. We'll do that again. Okay. Now what you can see is I can print UI and I can print user info, and you can see now they're different. Okay. So I've added fill to this one, and this one stays the same. Okay, so I have something I can mess around with. I can do stuff to this particular one, and I don't have to worry about messing with the very, very first one. Okay, so that's really, really useful to be able to do that. Now you can also create a new empty list and concatenate the old list to it. Now the way that you would do this is way easier, by the way. The way that you would do this is you would just do UI plus equals user info. And now if I print UI, you can see that UI is just the same thing. Oh, actually, sorry. I have to instantiate it. UI equals empty brackets, and then we'll do it. Oops. UI plus equals user info. There we go. So there we go, and voila, we have it. Okay, now remember, you do have to instantiate that thing, so you have to say, hey, this is a list, and then you can add to it. Okay, so that's the second way you can do it. You can do it with a for loop, or you can do it with the concatenation functionality. Now, in terms of lists, what's interesting is you can set things to each other where the same name references, different names reference the same thing. Okay, and you got to be really, really careful of that, because that's called a shallow copy, which means if you change something in list 1, it's also going to change it in list 2. Okay, we want to have a deep copy where we create a new list and then just save it into a new list so they are totally different. Okay. All right. So as we've already seen, it's good to iterate. It's good to search. It's good to find information in these lists. It's also really important to sometimes be able to do processing, especially in data analytics, where say we're trying to find a mean, we're trying to find a min, we're trying to find a max, we're trying to find a standard deviation, we're trying to find a mode, we're trying to find a median. We're doing all this data processing and we're trying to figure out what's going on. It's really important to be able to actually process these lists. So again, list elements can be used in calculations, like I mentioned, a mean, for instance. So to be able to calculate a total number of values, we're going to use an accumulator. We've already talked about accumulators. It shouldn't be very new to you. To average them, obviously you use an accumulator, accumulate all of them, and then you can just use the length of the list to actually divide it all by. You can actually create a function that actually returns a list or takes a list in as an argument, and then you can do stuff to that list, and then you can return something back. Okay, so we're going to actually create a function that actually does do processing on those lists. Okay. So again, a function can return a reference to a list, and you can save the contents of a list to a file by write lines. Okay, the file object's write lines method. Okay, and then to read data from a file, you can use the read lines method straight into the actual into the actual list. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of PyCharm here, talking about some of these things. So let's just go ahead and create a calculate mean of a list method or a function here. Okay, so we have user info here. We're going to go ahead and create a function, and we're going to call this def calc mean. Now we're going to take a list in. We're going to call this nums. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to iterate through nums. So for num in nums, right, we're going to have an accumulator. And since we're doing addition, we're going to have an accumulator set with the additive identity. Okay, so accum equals 0. So then we're going to do accum plus equals num. So we're going to add num into that accumulator. And then we're going to find the average, and we're just going to get the average as the accumulator over the length of nums. Okay, now what we're going to do then is we're going to return the average. Okay, so now what we can see is we have this function to calculate the mean of this list of numbers, and I'll change this into numbers. Okay, so numbers comes in, we set the accumulator to 0, we add all those numbers up, and then we create an average, which is the accumulator divided by the number of numbers, essentially. Okay, and then we return that average. So let's go ahead and generate some numbers. There we go. So I just randomly generated some numbers, and we're going to call this, just so you can see the pass by value. All right, so this is numbers. Okay, so let's say I want to get the average of this particular list. Make sure I don't have any squiggles. There we go. I want to get the average of this list. Okay, so we're going to get num avg, numbers avg equals, I'm going to call this function calc mean, and I'm going to pass in numbers as a list. Now what I'm going to get off of that is the average of that particular list. So let's go ahead and run that. 8.058823 blah 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 blah. Okay, so I can actually pass a list in. I can create accumulator to 0, and then I can add everything up with that accumulator, divide it by the length of the numbers, and then return the average of that list. Okay, so that's a really great way to actually calculate a mean or some sort of a function, create a function to actually process a list. Okay, so I added them up, divided them. Obviously, I passed an argument as a function. Now, what's interesting is we can also save the data. We can read data out, and we can push data into a particular file. Which is really, really important, because a lot of times we're going to have a file, we're going to open that up, and then we are going to read that into a list so that we can do stuff with the list, because it's a lot easier to do stuff with a list than it is to do stuff with a file. Okay, so to be able to do that, we're going to create another function here. We're going to call this read file to list. Okay, so we're going to open up a file, we're going to read that into a list, we're going to return the list. Okay, so we don't actually have a file that we can actually read it in. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create one. So file, we're going to call this nums. We're just going to start with a text. That's fine. And then in nums, we're going to have something like this. Whoops, and then we're not going to have that. We're going to make sure that it is formatted correctly, though. Okay, so these are all integers. Okay, so we have nums. So we can actually read that file into a list. Okay, so if we remember, we have f equals open. Oops. Okay, so we have our open function, and we remember that the first argument that we're going to pass in is the name of that file. And obviously the file is in the same directory as chapter7.py, so we can find it easily. Now we're going to open that up in read mode, okay, because we don't need to do anything with that. Now what's cool is if we go back over here, we can actually see that we have, you can save the contents of a list to a file. We can also read the data from a file using the readlines method. So let's go ahead and try to use the readlines method. Okay, so f.readlines. Okay, so we have this function now. What that's going to do is it's going to want to read lines into some sort of a list. So let's go ahead and create a list. Oops, I don't need that. Let's create a list called numbers. Okay, and we're going to set that as empty. And then we can actually read in the lines of the file into numbers. Let's go ahead and print that and make sure that works. Okay, so now in order to actually get to this, I need to call it. Okay, so let's go ahead and call read file to list, and we're going to call that with numbers. Oh, no, actually we're not going to do that. We're going to return that to nums. Okay, and actually I don't even need to do that because I'm not returning anything. Okay, so we're just going to call into it. When we call into it, we're not passing anything in. We're going to open this. We're going to create a new list. We're going to read the lines into numbers. We're going to print the numbers. Now, I can't actually just return that, oops, for now because it'll work. So let's go ahead and do nums, oops, here. Okay, so we actually have something to return. It should be good. But we're going to validate this right here. So we're going to run this, and there you go. Now, you'll notice that we have a little bit of an issue here because we have /in on every single one of these, right? So you remember we have the rstrip function, right? So we can actually do f.readlines, and I'm wondering if we can do, I don't think we can do rstrip directly. So we would actually have to iterate then through to convert that. So we're going to get the new lines on there. If we want to actually get rid of those, we would have to go through and actually strip those out one by one. But you get the idea. You can read things in really, really easily. Now, if this nums.txt actually was something like names, it would read it in a lot easier with those new lines as well. Okay, Adam, John, and Bill Stan. So there you go. There's your read lines. Now, you can also write lines. So I have this, and I want to create a function. And I will show you how to strip those off there. But just for now, just so I can demonstrate this to you, we're just going to move on to write file to list. Or sorry, we're going write list to file. There we go. All right, and we're going to pass in the list called nums. It could be numbers or it could not be numbers. We have numbers up here that we're going to go ahead and use. Okay, so obviously we need to open that. And again, we missed something here, and hopefully you caught it. We got to have an f.close. Okay, so for every open, you need to close. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up the file nums.t. Actually, we're going to open up something new. We're going to call it nums2.txt. We are going to open that in append mode so that we can continually add to it. Okay, so I have that open now. If it doesn't exist, it'll create it. If it's there, it'll go ahead and append it. And then we're going to go ahead and f.writelines, and we're going to throw nums in there. And then we're going to do f.close, and there we go. Okay. Now what I'm going to do with this is we're going to call write list to file first. Okay, write list to file, and we're going to go ahead and add numbers to that. And then when we open this one up, we're actually going to open nums2. Now it doesn't exist yet, but it's going to exist whenever I call the write list to file, and then it's going to write it, and then we're going to read everything into numbers, and then we'll have numbers. Okay, so let's get rid of this. Let's go ahead and print it here. And there we go. Let's go ahead and run it, see if we get any errors. All right, we got an error because write must be a string, not a num. All right, and that is going to be in line number 28, f.writelines nums. Okay, and it's because it's numbers that it's causing problems. Now, this is where these instances become more of an issue, because if I pass in something like names it's a lot easier, right? Because I can just pass names into this function and it's totally fine, right? Because it's going to pass it in, it's going to run it, Adam, John, Stan, everything's good to go, right? Because it's all strings. But it's really hard to convert it to strings when it's not actually strings, okay? So in this instance, if you want to actually write nums, so numbers, you would need to iterate it through it with a list, right? Okay, so we want to for num in nums. Okay, so we're going to go through each number. We're going to do f.write. We're going to write it in. And then in here, we're going to do num, but we're going to have to convert that to a string, right? So we want to make sure that we're writing a string into that file. Now, if we want to make sure that there's also a new line, we need to go ahead and add a new line at the end of that. Okay, so now what happens is we open this, and let me grab this. Let's get rid of this. So we're going to open this up, and then we're going to iterate through the numbers. We're going to convert the number to a string, add a new line, and then we're going to write it, and then we're going to close it. And then we're going to hopefully open that back up and read that out. So let's see what happens. All right, so now you can see I have actually written that in, and I was able to pull that back out because everything needs to be a string. But I couldn't use the write lines because I was messing with numbers. Now, if you're using only names, it'll be a lot easier. All right, so there's some read to, write from sort of basics there. I want you to mess around with this because this stuff is really, really, really important. We're going to come back in the next video with list comprehensions. So hold tight here.